Hello, everybody. Welcome to my workshop again because it's Thursday night, not a night for Adam, Lord Adam, my guest, who has its morning. And he's going to tell us all about his morning and beyond because he's a very knowledgeable people leader, coach, executive, whatever, author of books, leader of groups, and all that stuff. And we're going to cover that all. But I would like to start with the opener that I believe is powerful and hopefully a little bit controversial. So, Adam, I'll let you use this one as the introduction because I know you can. So, let's start with this: true or false? It's harder than ever to keep employees engaged today.
Hmm. Um, well, I'll caveat by saying in our line of
I
work,
knew
the
it.
more yeah, you knew I would, the more we get into um, transformation and exploring depth, the harder it becomes to just give a black or white answer, which probably makes us very terrible guests on shows like this. But I would say there's probably a lot of, so on the one hand, I would say absolutely true because there's more distractions and we do less work honing the muscle of focus. We just don't work that muscle, so it's atrophied, and we live our lives mostly in a fairly distractive state, and that's going to make it harder to be engaged. And I'm just going to be sort of wander off towards something else. And then there's also more things pulling at my attention. Never mind, even if I was exactly as able to focus as I had been 60 years ago, there's just more stuff demanding my attention. So that's going to get in the way of engagement. But then on the other hand, I have this feeling like um, it almost takes less than ever to really create engagement because there's such a desire for it. Like, I think that there's such a thirst in people to, like, man, I want a company that listens to me, and I want a company that gets me, and I want a career that really I feel seen in. And if we can provide that, I think that creates such a strong signal in the midst of all that noise of distraction that makes engagement really powerful. So it's kind of a bit of both, I think, is the cheat answer I'm going to give.
It's a good one, actually, and let's use it as a springboard. So you work with the concept of being gotten, being understood, working
Yes.
with let's say deeper type of understanding, and as you call it, transformation. We're going to go right there. And I know you work with executive leaders, various levels. Uh, how would they approach you? Do they approach you with this angle, like, okay, I find it hard to engage my people and I want to be a better leader? Or is it more, hey, I don't feel gotten in my life, or I feel my career is misaligned with what I want to do? Where do you meet your typical clients, and how do you help them with distinguishing what they need to distinguish?
Mm. Well, my typical people would be kind of they'd follow the same path I've been on, because that's in the work of coaching. I keep seeing Lord Adam here. I put that as a joke. I thought that was just going to be you and I that are going to see that. Well, everyone, there it is. I'm Lord Adam apparently. So if I can't fix it, I'll feature it. So that's why that's there. Um, so my people follow a similar path to me, which is they're quite brilliant and have big hearts, but they learn to shut down their hearts and just run everything through their head, because there's a safety to that. There's a we could almost call it like a ruthless efficiency to operating that way. And so by the time they come and usually start engaging and work with me, they're a little bit frustrated, and they can kind of see the bankruptcy that that's no longer working and creating the results they want. But at the same time, they can't see any other option. And they kind of have this attitude like, I guess I have to engage people, but I don't really want to. And what's the point? And why should I have to? And if I didn't have to, I wouldn't bother doing it. So they can't really see what it's costing them. And it sort of exists at this point for them like a necessary evil. Sort of like how, I think, probably more stereotypically than was actually accurate, but like these people, the boomers stereotypically would be like, oh, millennials, why don't they just do what we want? Like, we bought them free soda, we got them beanbag chairs. This is the stereotype, of course. Why aren't they doing what they should be doing? I hate these people. I hate dealing with these people. And it's like, there's what's missing is like a deep caring and understanding of those people and what makes them tick, and sort of a lack of curiosity about that. And instead it's just like, it's sort of the same way I'd relate to a cog. What's wrong with this cog? Why isn't this cog doing what it's supposed to do? What do I have to do to make the cog operate the way it's supposed to do? So that feels a little bit long-winded, my answer, but that at least gives us a starting point.
I actually think it's a good one because it also connects to the point of quick fixes. So I do shamelessly advertise these videos as how to, fix X through Y in 5 minutes or less. And I'm wondering if people find your content, because you wrote a book which we're going to talk about. You have a podcast called Transformational Leader. Do they find your content, to your knowledge, mostly by looking for quick fixes, or are they really going for what you are offering, which is transformation and deep work?
Ooh, I'm probably the worst person to ask about that, because like I don't have much of it's hard for me to see my own impact, whether my content resonates with people or not. I know it resonates with some people, but what I imagine is that, let me just see if I can summon up an example first. What we're craving, what we're kind of desperate for in the world is like just the right answers. And it's just like, can someone just give me the right answer, and then I'll do the right answer, and then I won't be stuck where I'm stuck. So for example, like someone's frustrated in their leadership and they don't seem to be creating the right approach, and it doesn't seem to be making things happen. And so they're like, oh, I just need the right answer. And someone comes along and is like, servant leader, always eat last. Here's a set of rules to follow. You always eat last. You always like are behind your people or out in front or whatever the appropriate thing is. Da 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 da. And that feels so good in the moment, because it's like, oh, finally something I can do. I don't have to sit in this discomfort or the dissonance or the not knowing. And I can just like, I know I'm doing the right thing, and I know things will get better now. That's very comforting for us. And my content is like the opposite of that. My whole approach and my content is really like, um, instead of getting a quick answer that's going to like solve your problem, let's take a look. Let's really slow down and sit in the discomfort of the problem you're finding, and seeing how the very solution you try to create reinforces the problem. And to do that requires really like a lot of patience. It requires a lot of sitting in the discomfort that comes from not having a quick answer. And for the most part, that's uncomfortable. And so I find, to answer your question, like my content is the sort of content where a lot of people just step over it because they're like, oh, screw this. I can't be bothered with this. And then the people that do engage with it are like, oh my God, this really makes a difference because I'm actually getting to the root of what's going on, as opposed to just making changes on the surface.
So does it mean that people have to go through series of breakdown and find out that actually their simple solution quick fixes don't work before they are ready for this type of intervention, this type of support?
Yeah, sometimes it's not good news, but like, I like to use the metaphor of someone walking and falling in a hole in their life. And they hire someone, and they're like, okay, the problem is that I'm stuck in a hole. And so the person's like, great, I'm really good at getting people out of a hole. Let's get them out of this hole. And so we'll help you get better at building ladders. And so the person gets good at building a ladder, and they climb out of the hole, but then suddenly they're in another hole. And so they build another ladder, and then suddenly they get out of the hole, and then they're back in the hole. And so the solution that was created is sort of like, oh, you've managed to like build a ladder, you managed to get out of a hole, this is making things better. But if the actual problem is that I walk around unwilling to look at the ground and continually blunder into holes, then no amount of helping me get out of the hole faster is going to make any difference. It's just going to make the cycle turn over even faster. Is this making sense, Alesh, so far?
Oh, to me, it does for sure. So
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. So then the thing is that when we're in the hole, all we can think about is how much we need a ladder. And so my role is often to start, it's kind of to hold one foot in both sides. The one foot is to say, okay, great, I get it. You really want a ladder. Before we do that, can we just take a look and see how you ended up in this hole in the first place? And people are like, fine, but hurry up. You promised we're going to make a ladder. And there's this part of them that's sort of unwilling to let go of the idea that what we need, and every human has this, myself included, is like, what I need is the thing I can see in the short term. I need that solution. And the only way I can really eventually let go of it is by giving it to myself enough and coming to this point of bankruptcy where I realize, oh, that ladder doesn't seem to be making anything better. In fact, things seem to be picking up and going faster. And so coming back to your question, is it requirement that people have a series of breakdowns? Kind of. They have to bankrupt this immediate solution that feels so good in the short term before we can kind of get to the point where we're like, okay, I'm ready to try something else because that thing's not working. I've tried it enough.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
How would you distinguish the solutions that might actually work long term, like more technical one? I know that what I do in my job, it's people skills. Sometimes we call it leadership trainings. Usually, quick fixes, checklists, techniques that you can use and apply all the
Yeah.
time. And I would say, let me use this analogy of brushing your teeth, right? It's just you're gonna learn how to do that, and you can keep doing that till you have some teeth left, and it kind of keeps working for you.
Yeah.
But you are actually in your work focusing on the transformation, which is something else. You are saying that the same solutions that worked for you, maybe as a leader, maybe as an individual in the past, got you here, but they might not get you beyond a certain point.
Yes.
What's the difference?
Uh, Let me make sure I understand. So what's the difference between a transformational solution and what was the other one that we're comparing it to?
Maybe let me try to rephrase it. So,
Yeah, yeah,
uh, how do I know, or how does your client know? Okay, these are the solutions that I can keep using. They're okay. They are bringing results, like brushing teeth, and
yeah.
these are the solutions that are actually keeping me stuck.
Uh-huh. And how do I determine which is which?
How do you determine for, I guess not for the client, but how does a client determine for themselves, or how do you help them figure it out?
Yeah, well, it so on the one hand, there's like we can be in the practice of studying ourselves. So I mean, as humans, we're generally pretty resistant to this idea, but I can track my progress. So I'm like, hey, I want to win the gold medal at the Olympics. And I think the thing I need to do is like run every single day. Just practice running. Okay. So I can do that and I can check like, is my time coming down? Am I getting closer to beating the world record or the gold medal record or whatever it is? Is this working or not? So that's one way we can determine, which seems very simplistic. Just like, is this actually moving me closer towards my goal? The
It doesn't,
the
because you realized you wanted to win the medal in archery, right? So running is
Right, well,
going
that
to
would
use
be
that.
one example. Or maybe I realize like, oh, training every day doesn't work. I have to take breaks. I don't know, whatever it happens to be. But um, the other side to this is like, to some extent, I'm never going to be able to see if I'm in my life, I won't be able to see my life with full altitude. Like you can either be up in the sky looking down, or you can be down on the ground playing the game. This is why when there's a professional basketball team, like an NBA team, they have the players and they have the coach. And the coach is not on the court with the players, he stands off the court. And the players are not off the court with the coach because otherwise the game wouldn't happen. And so both of these roles are essential, and they're both distinct from one another. And so this is why I'm such an advocate, is why I'm very committed to working with my own coach, and why I advocate that for other people is because I can't see when I'm caught in a forest. All I can see is the tree in front of me that I'm certain is the thing I have to address. And I just have to cut that down with an axe. And my coach can see and help me say, like, hey, it seems like you're in a forest and you're trying to get out of it by cutting down every tree that's in your way. Is that really going to work?
So this is, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned coaching. Finally
Mm,
we're gonna get there.
finally.
I don't finally, right? So I should have mentioned, and I didn't, that you hold an MCC certification, or actually MC certification, right? So from,
MCC.
well, the last C is for certification. So if I want to
Right.
be a
Yeah, it's a bit
smartest, it's like
redundant. Yeah.
MC certification. But yeah,
Uh-huh.
it's your certification. So it's unique. I know you said it's what, about 1,500 people who hold it one.
Yeah.
What does that entail, and what does it mean to be a coach with this level of let's say expertise and skill?
Well, it's a fascinating thing. So I'll just provide a quick bit of prefacing here, which is The International Coach Federation, the ICF, is the body that accredits coaches, but there's no requirement that coaches be accredited. It's not like the practice of law, where I'm also a member of the bar here in British Columbia, and if I tried to practice law without being a member of the bar, I would get sued. That's not going to happen in coaching. So anyone can call themselves a coach without any certification. So there's
Fun
that.
fact: you also have a bar in your basement, right?
I do have a bar, not in my basement,
Yeah.
in the main floor of my house, but yeah, I have a
Oh,
very
nice.
cool British pub in my house. So the ICF is attempting basically to kind of legitimize the profession of coaching, which has been evolving for maybe the last 40 years, probably closer to 30, but thereabouts. And they have 3 levels of accreditation. So they have the ACC, which is, I think, the accredited or the associate certified coach, the PCC, which is the professional certified coach, and the MCC, which is the master certified coach. And the first level is basically like, this person understands the nuts and bolts of coaching. They can kind of like coach with some intelligence, like some understanding. They're not all over the map. They kind of have a bit of a structure on what they're doing, blah, blah, blah. The PCC, so that's kind of like the base level. Like, hey, don't worry, this coach actually has done some training. They've got some hours under their belt, blah, blah, blah. The PCC level, as I've heard it described to me, is sort of like the level where this coach has mastered the science of coaching. So they understand the kind of questions to ask. They understand how to show up for the client. They can kind of describe to some extent what's happening with the client and how all of this is working. So it's a mastery of the science. And then the MCC is the level where it's mastering the art, and perhaps we could call it the spirit or the magic of coaching. So this is where it's not so much about what we're doing, it's about like who I'm being with that client. And I want to elaborate on that in a little bit, but like, I can ask the right question. The right question might be like, how does this make you feel? But I can ask that from a place where I'm like deeply connected with my client, and I'm stepping into my own vulnerability. Or I can ask that same question from a place where I'm totally safe and I'm just sort of checking off the box in my formulaic question. And that would be the difference between the PCC and the MCC. Does that make sense, the way I've kind of spoken to that?
Actually, I would like you to elaborate on part of it. So,
Yeah.
you mentioned the being. So I wanna go there in a little bit. But for
Hmm.
now, let me just catch on the part about vulnerability. So,
Yeah.
many people watching this, they might not know what are the distinction between the types of coaching. They might be thinking sport coaching, ontological coaching might be beyond the distinction. You
Yeah.
mentioned you bring vulnerability into the coaching as a coach. I mean, that's not how I picture coach. I picture coach to bring the rigor, the mad map of the playground and showing me where to go, telling me what to do.
Yeah.
Uh, how do you do that? What does that actually mean, and how does it bring value to the client?
Yeah. Well, the best way I can speak to that is starting in the context of leadership, which is that most leaders wish their staff were more vulnerable, more intimate, would be willing to share a little more vulnerably, bring forward like, hey, I'm struggling with this, because then I could support them. They don't do that. Adam, what's the issue? Alesh, why don't people bring that to me? So that's what a lot of leaders will bring forward. And what those leaders don't recognize is like, they're actually not willing to be vulnerable themselves with their staff. So they're not really willing to go first. To like, if we want more vulnerability from our staff, we have to model what that's like, meaning we have to go and be vulnerable first. And so coaching is no different. Coaching is a relationship where even the act of inviting someone to say, like, what do you really want? That can be a really vulnerable thing. It sounds very simple when we're just talking about it intellectually, but to say, like, I want to work 20 hours a week and I want to get paid twice as much as I currently get paid, that can be very edgy to ask for that, because what the world trains us growing up is, don't ask for what you want. That's out of place. That's selfish. That's blah, 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 blah. And so if I'm going to ask my client to step into their vulnerability, I have to model it first. I have to practice that. And so that might mean, like, at times where I notice I'm asking questions and every question the client has a very quick answer for, my practice of vulnerability might be saying something like, hey, I notice every answer I have, it's like, or every question I have, you have a very quick, short, well put together answer, and it feels very safe. And I'm feeling like this conversation is not making much of a difference here. And I'm kind of wondering what the point of this conversation is. So that's a vulnerable thing to put in the space. I'm kind of putting myself at risk. The client might be like, well, what's going on? You're meant to have this sorted out. And I'm kind of opening the kimono and saying, hey, I don't have this sorted out and I don't actually know what's going on. Help us find where we are at. And so that's one example of what we would want to see in like a master level coaching, is like the ability to really bring that kind of vulnerability to take risks in the conversation.
Got it. And before we go into the being part, what does it mean? Vulnerability versus bleeding all over the the team. I just wanted to. Now I forgot. I wanted to ask about. No, I didn't want to ask actually. I wanted to plug actually your content, because I got a lot of value out of that. So for all the 3.5 people who might be watching live and the millions to watch after we're done, I just wanna invite all of them to subscribe to the Transformational Leader podcast, formerly known as Get Lit, right?
Yes,
And
back in the day.
I really enjoyed the recent episodes, which are where you are role modeling this. You are basically talking through the breakdowns you're going through and resistance you're experiencing, which is something that is very rare to experience or hear or witness from a leader. Normally, we only see the facade, and I
Yes.
find it very helpful and highly recommend to everybody.
Can I make a distinction here that I think might add to that?
Sure.
The distinction is talking about vulnerability versus being vulnerable. And I often, I guess this is a bit of a hot take, but like that's often my experience of Brene Brown. Talks a lot about vulnerability, not often that vulnerable, in my experience. I don't listen to that much of her stuff for this reason, but all the same, if you love Brene Brown, that's fine. Totally go with her. This isn't to dissuade anyone from anything. But this is really, really common in the world, is we have people that they shout from the rooftops about vulnerability because we hear it's so important, and we hear conversations like this. We come scrolling through LinkedIn and we see vulnerability in a coaching conversation or a leadership conversation. We're like, oh, vulnerability, I got to do that. And then what we do is we show up and we say things like, vulnerability alert, I used to be poor and that was really hard for me and it was really tough, but then I overcame that because I did work with my coach and now I have lots of money. There's no vulnerability at all in that. That's telling people about this thing that one time was hard for you. Vulnerability only ever exists in the moment. So it exists right here in this moment when I say the thing that's edgy for me to say. I'm trying to think of something edgy to say in this moment, but it's not coming to mind. I'm drawing a blank. But like, that's the distinction between talking about vulnerability or talking about leadership, as opposed to being vulnerable or being leader in the moment. And that threshold seems very subtle and like just it's on a razor's edge. But the moment someone steps across into actually being vulnerable in the moment, everything changes. Everything changes in that moment. And that's what we're missing.
I mean, um, I think the distinction for me that's meaningful for me, I guess, is the past stories, right? Is it past tense? Is it present tense? Which you said, right? If it's present tense, it's there, and your last episodes were present tense. So I was rejoicing, listening to you suffering through something. I was like, yeah, okay, that's so relatable. So, very, very cool this way. I'm wondering, before we transition to being, how would we? So this is live on LinkedIn, in Facebook outer space, but mainly LinkedIn audience. And I often, when I'm working with leaders, preparing them for let's say conferences, events where they need to speak to the reports, I am encouraging them to be more open, more authentic. But there is a fairly strong conviction, very strong belief in um, and among some of them, that this is not wanted. They want me strong. They want me to.
Right.
They don't want to see I can't fail. I need to kind of make sure I'm impeccable in there. And
Yeah.
it's what would you say to that?
I would always go, so what the audience wants, we don't have a lot of control over that. And frankly, we're not really sure. Like I might have a belief that the audience wants me to be strong, but how do I know that? Unless I went and canvassed each of them beforehand. So where I usually go with leaders is like, how do you want to experience this conversation you're going to give? And like, how do you want to feel during it? Because that is a truth that is a truth. That's not a belief. That's not a thought. That's not a maybe, or I'm pretty sure that they want that. It's like, no. This is how I want to experience this. I want to experience this way. And then what I'm more interested in doing is supporting people to come from that place, whatever it is that they've described. And generally speaking, most people would like an experience of feeling more relaxed, having more fun when they're presenting, being more open to like kind of whatever happens, as opposed to being rigid and like, this slide has 3 seconds and then this slide 4 seconds and I do this and then I do that. And so the magic here is that when we are around someone who is having fun and is more open, and is enjoying what they're doing and is speaking from a place of like fluidity, that's way more engaging than someone that like does all the slides perfect and like at each timeline and all of that sort of stuff. It's way more engaging. It's way more fun to be around. But the hard part is there's always a moment where you have to trust that. I have to trust that how I want to show up, that's going to be what serves everyone, as if I am true to myself. And so that's usually, rather than like try to get people to be more open, I check in with them. How do you want to be? How do you want to experience this? And then we might work on the stories and the way of them stepping into that. But that's kind of the starting point.
Got it.
Yeah.
So since you mentioned stories, I think that's a good transition into the being, and I was kind of worried, how do you bring being and ontological coaching into LinkedIn? It's kind of weird. So let's try to do that awkwardly, as I just did.
Yeah.
What does it actually mean to work with being? What does it mean to kind of bring your authentic self? What does it even mean? I mean, and shameless plug in here. That's what your book is about, right? So that's your book. I'm gonna show it in here. I'm not going to tell you how much Adam is paying me for showing this on camera.
I've got it color too. There's it in color.
Yeah. I'm colorblind, don't you? Yeah, you have a better one. You have a better one, and you have another advantage because you wrote this book, and I haven't even read it yet. So I only read the parts related to my essence.
Your essence.
And now we're getting there. Oh my God! So essence being all that stuff. So how do we get there from this transactional utilitarian? Okay, I have a problem. I need to fix it. How do you bring a client there? How do you bring a person there?
So, well, let me take a swing at introducing this concept, and you can interrupt me if you're like, well, you're going off piste. So the work you and I are engaged in is ontological in nature. And what that means is ontology is the study of being. And so the difference would be sort of like, you could, if we had someone whose internal story was, I'm repulsive and people don't want to be around me, there's going to be some ways they show up in their life. Like, for example, they may just never go up and ask someone they'd like to go on a date with. They just don't ask those people because their story is, I'm repulsive and no one wants to date me. So why would I bother doing that? And most attempts to create change operate at the level of what they're doing. So what I mean by that is someone would be like, oh, let me help you. I'll be a dating coach. I'm going to hold you accountable to go and ask out 20 people. So from here until then, until we next talk, you better ask out 20 people, or I'm going to like draw graffiti on your favorite pig, or whatever the structure would be to make them do that. They're like, oh, I don't want that. So I'm going to do that. So what happens is this person goes out into their life and they ask out 20 people. However, there's been no work done to change the underlying story. So we've addressed what they're doing. We've changed the behavior on the surface they're doing, but their being has remained the same. And As a result, there's going to be a really predictable way those results are going to happen. Like if I believe that who I am is repulsive and people don't desire me, I'm going to go up to someone, I'm going to ask them out, but I'm probably going to ask them out a particular way. Like I might say, hey, I don't know, you probably are a no to this, but like just in case, would you like to go out with me sometime? Or maybe I'm going to kind of set it up so that I'm not putting too much into this, so that I'm not too devastated when they tell me no. So I might be like, hey, I've got to ask out 20 people, so I'm asking you out. Are you interested? No, I didn't think so. Okay, see you later. Or maybe I don't do any of that. Maybe I stick right to the script and I go up to them, I go, hello, would you like to go out with me? Okay, goodbye. But that energy underneath who I'm being is still going to find its way out. It always does. This makes sense so far, Lesh, the way I'm describing this?
Actually, it's. I think it may be a bit too fast because you
Aha,
mentioned the story and the concept of a story. I would like to pause there a little bit because
sure.
that's not I think universally understood. And I gotta say, in my life, I have problems in some areas distinguishing stories from facts. In some areas, I'm pretty good, but I'm getting better with practice. Many
Great.
people and myself still in some areas is like, what do you mean? It's not a story. I mean, I'm repulsive. I mean, here's the evidence. There you go, and it's a fact. So
Aha.
where do you start kind of splitting this into fact versus story?
Great. So we can, and at some point, whenever you like, I can transition this into leadership. So
Sure
we'll
thing.
spend as much time as we want to be here, and then we can transition there. So um, this is a bit challenging for a lot of people because we really hold certain things that are beliefs as factual. Like, no, 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 but I really am repulsive. Here's all the evidence I have. Here's my proof. I've asked out 100 people. They've all said no. That's proof that I am certifiably repulsive. And but like there is no repulsive as an example, if we're staying with that one, is like a judgment. It's a label. There's no objective like arbiter in the sky that's like that person's hot and that person's ugly. That person is repellent to people and that person is gorgeous to people. Now we have some metrics, like the more symmetrical your face is, the more attractive you tend to be considered. But then we have people that are totally magnetic that don't fit that. Like I often think of Adam Driver, the actor who plays Kylo Ren in Star Wars. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Sure.
That dude looks weird to me, and yet I can't look away. And so, as much as we can create these rules and be like, no, 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 blah, 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 I'm genuinely repulsive, it's like, no, that doesn't, that's a belief about ourselves. And so, this is starting to get a little nuanced, but a lot of how we experience the world is through our beliefs about the world, our beliefs about ourselves. And those beliefs, another word for them would be our stories about them. And if I have a story, regardless of how I look, if my internal story is I'm gorgeous and people want to date me, I'm going to have a different result when I go out and ask people out than if my underlying story is I'm ugly and people don't want anything to do with me. Even if I do the exact same thing, the results are going to be different.
Got it. So, and I'm wondering now because we want to talk about leadership. Would you First of all, I'd like to kind of pause with before we go into that with some definition. What would that actually mean for you? In your context, what the leadership is, and I'll save the question for after we're there.
Uh-huh. So the simplest one would be like leadership is my capacity to be however there is required for me to be and to do whatever there is required for me to do to create a particular result. That's the most simplest definition. Want me to elaborate, explain that, say more about it?
I think yes, because based on what you said, we'd be like, okay, so I need to kind of walk out of the house. I need to tie my shoes, so I gotta go and tie them, and voila, I'm a leader.
Mm-hmm. Well, if the result that you're committed to creating is getting out of your house, then yes.
Hmm.
But
Okay.
if the result you're committed to was like to have 1,000 people march with you down to the capital of your city, then not yet. You've got more stuff to do. So it depends what I'm committed to creating in the world.
Got it. So it's normally it would be in the context of larger commitments where I don't really know how to get there. So with the shoes, I mean, probably when I'm 3 years old and I have to go and tie my shoes, that requires really some not rigor. That requires something I'm not capable of. I mean, with uh, summoning 100,000 people anywhere, I don't think I can do it right now. I'm not able to. Is that the
Uh-huh.
distinction or not really?
Can you, I might have gotten a little lost there. Can you tell me
I'm
what's the
wondering. I'm
question?
wondering if so for me the way I also understood the work you do is it's probably it requires some order of magnitude in it requires some level of impossibility as maybe my current story hold the result as impossible, and then I feel I need to step into it. And now I don't know if I'm making any sense. How does that sound to you?
Well, kind of. Like if I'm sort of, hey, I don't want anything in my life other than to eat like zoodles out of a can every night and to go to bed and get 8 hours of sleep and to like work my job, and that's all I want, then I can be a leader in that. It doesn't require that I like go and I'm going to change the planet, and if I'm not doing that, I'm not a leader. That's not how leadership works. Now, most of the work that we engage in with people, like the work you engage in with us through the Forge, the work I engage with my clients, they generally want something bigger than that. And so our practice is developing their leadership so as to create that bigger result that they want to create. But that's not a requirement. It's not that you cannot be a leader unless you're playing for some big, huge result, because that imposes like there's a right way to be a leader, which is that you have a particular kind of result. That's not the case.
Got it.
Uh-huh.
Could you provide from the practice with people you work with, could you provide an example that might be relatable for, let's say, single contributor, junior employees, something that embodies the way you think about leadership, but it's actually not, it doesn't feel objectively as a huge thing. What could be something small that actually allows us still to demonstrate leadership?
Well, like gathering 100 people together might be a simple example. I want to run a meetup for this particular thing, and I want to make that result happen. I want 100 people to show up and do this. And I don't know how to do that. And I have stories that I'm not the sort of person to make that happen. Like that would be a really small example. Or if you had an executive at a company, it might be like, hey, I really want to, our company grows 10% every year, but I actually want to double our profits this year. That's the commitment that I'm going to create. There's some stuff in the way of that. I know how to create 10% more profits, but I have no idea how to create 100% more. How do I make that happen? So those would be like some very simple examples of how people, like just a practice that people might commit to taking on to creating in their life, that then there would be some work to do to make happen.
Got it. What would that mean when those people are working with you? So suppose someone approaches you, looking at your awesome website, and which, by the way, it's hilarious. It still is. I need to put it on screen. And let's say you still have it there, right? Coaching for the smartest person in the room. So
Yes. Yeah.
it's like, yeah, that's totally me. I need Adam. And how does it usually go? So what would be the, let's say, the typical commitments they might have, or they feel it's like above their current capacity? How do you work with it, and how does the ontological part of the work with being comes into play?
hmm So the starting point for my people is that, again, remember I said big heads, big hearts, learn to run everything through their head. So when you do that, you lose access to your desire, because the desire, what we want, exists in our head, and what we have to do or what we should do or what we need to do, that comes from the head. So my people, by the time they meet me, they become expert in their life at doing what needs to be done, getting done what should be done. So they're really good at doing things like making a bunch of money. They're really good at like whatever you have to do to like, do whatever you have to do. This is the story what you should do to feel good. But they're not so good at feeling fulfilled in any capacity. And so the starting point where they come to work with me is that they don't even know what they want to do. They don't even know what the result is they want to create, because they shut down their desires so long ago that they don't have access to that. And so consequently, as a result, They tend to show up and be like, everything's fine, and I'm bored, and I'm feeling kind of unfulfilled, and I don't know what I feel like I should do something more, but I don't know what it is. And so, does that make sense so far?
So would it be typical that there is some element of unknown, or is it also like, oh, Adam, I need to tighten this bolt, show me how. There's always
Yeah, more
this.
the former.
Mhm.
Yeah, they just not know. They're and like what most of us do is there's a world we know. This is what I know how to do. This is how I know to make things happen. I can create all of the results inside this sort of sphere. And then we live our life in that sphere. And there's a bunch of stuff outside of it that we've just given up on. Oh, I know how to make twice as much money by working twice as hard. So if I wanted more money, I could work harder. I don't know how to make twice as much money working half as hard. I'm just going to give up on that. I don't even believe that's possible. And so most people, when they start working with me, they're trying to figure out like, how do I get the life I want, which exists outside of the sphere, from doing the stuff that's inside the sphere? So like, how do I be happy with my life by doing what I'm supposed to do? And it's like, that's not going to work, because what you want in your life exists outside of the range of what you should do. There's no should to it. It's entirely from your heart. I'm doing a bit of a poor job explaining this. Guide me back, Alesh. Catch me in your
Um,
net.
well, I'm wondering you can reliably do this, right? So that's cool. I guess I'm wondering here with the impossibility that you mentioned, like, okay, it's not possible, I can't have that.
Yeah,
If this relates back to the stories we talked about, so it's not about things that are physically impossible, right? You don't want me to kind of survive at the bottom of the lake for 10 days or something like that
right.
and breathe with kills, but the impossibility is always perceived.
Yes. Yeah. So like my background before this work was law. And so I end up in conversations with lawyers from time to time. And lawyers are exquisite at figuring out like what are the boundaries that I'm playing in? And then how do I maximize inside those boundaries? So what's possible and what's not possible? How do I get the most out of what's possible? And so when we get into a conversation, the first question I always have to ask is, so what do you want? What do you want in your life? I can't give that to them. That has to be theirs to create. And they'll be like, well, currently I work about 80 hours a week. So I'd like to work 65 hours a week and like make about the same amount of money. And like, and it's like, really? You want to work 65 hours a week? Why? Well, because that's, you don't understand law, Adam. That's what you have to work. Like, so that would be good if I could get myself down there. So what they're doing is they're asking for what they think they can get inside of this sphere that we've been talking about. So they're like, well, I'm pretty sure that it would be possible for me to work 65 hours a week inside this career. So that's the thing I want. And that's okay if that's what they truly desire from their heart. But most of these people, if they were sitting at the drawing board of their life and could architect however they wanted their life to look, they would not be working 65 hours a week. They'd be like, I want to work 30 hours a week. One day a week I spend with my kid playing in a field, and like I make a bunch of money and I get all the repute and success that I really want, but I only have to work 30 hours a week. And so it's their belief about what is and is not possible that has them choose, I want to work 65 hours a week. And then because that belief exists as truth for them, they create that as their reality. So they go out and they're like, well, I guess the best I can do is 65 hours a week. So where do I find that? And so on and so forth.
Got it. I
Alesh is
think,
looking at his question list,
oh
his
yeah,
helpful notes. He's looking down.
just getting bored, looking all over the place.
There's got to be something else here.
It's just I'm just wondering now. How do we get it into the being part? Because what you mentioned, suppose the lawyer example, we you can tackle it very on kind of technical level. You can say, okay, so you hire a babysitter and you hire an assistant in somewhere in Singapore, Pakistan, wherever, right, to work for you remotely, blah blah blah. But that's probably not that's not the way you would treat that, and that's where the ontological part comes into the picture, right? So how do you kind of marry the, let's say, utilitarian practical approach, kind of squeeze more juice from the lemon you already have, versus, hey, let's go explore your being and see what that shows you.
Yeah. Well, so it wouldn't be for me to tell someone if all of that stuff you mentioned, hiring a babysitter, offshoring to Pakistan, all of that stuff. It wouldn't be for me to tell them that's the right way to do it or not. But I would bring some curiosity, like, okay, is that what you want? Just that you have a bunch of people and they'd be like, well, no, it's costing me like $100,000 a year. Oh, got it. So you're working less, but you've had to sacrifice what you're earning. That's not the whole tamale that you really want. And usually when we're talking about like being, there's a particular experience of life that people want. So a lot of people, they want like a degree of having an impact and feeling important and like there's meaning in their life. And that experience of life is at odds with feeling, on the other hand, like they're at peace and they can be restful and they have spaciousness in their life. Do you know people like that?
Oh yeah, most of them. I'm
Uh-huh.
meeting one in my bathroom, looking in the mirror all the time. So yeah.
Yeah, same. I'm assuming that's you and not some weird stranger that shows up in your bathroom from time to time.
My God, now I need to check after we're done with the
Yeah, you
call.
should. Yeah,
Oof.
grow a mustache and just see. But anyhow, so we have on the one hand, there's the success and the repute and like the meaningfulness and the all of that I can have. And on the other hand, I can have joy and spaciousness and ease and peace. And so for most of us, these two things exist as a trade-off. I can be this or I can be that. That's my experience of life. I get to have the experience of being one of those two things, but never both. And so people do stuff like I will grind and I will work super hard and I will create a bunch of success for the first 40 years of my life. Then I'll retire and I'll be spacious and have peace and all of that. And while I am grinding, I will not have any peace and life won't feel spacious, but I can look forward to when I do. And when I retire, I won't feel much meaning and I won't feel like I've got much impact in the world, but I can always remember the past when I did. So we're kind of like trading a bit off. The future and the past are at odds with each other. Does that part make sense before I add more? Add another layer.
No, totally. And I think that's what we see all over the place, right? I see it here on LinkedIn, like people, oh, I took sabbatical. Oh, kudos. I mean, you've been working too hard, so now you're not going to work at all. And
Exactly.
the other way around. So there's this. I don't know if you want to go there at this stage, but I also understand it as a differentiation between this contentment, maybe this Eastern approach, be content and in peace with what currently is, versus this, I'm going to call it Western approach, reaching for something out there and trying to kind of catch the worm, right? That's not currently in your grasp.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and so we kind of vilify one of these two things and then make the other one good. So like it's good to be at peace and spacious and like restful, and it's bad to strive. But they're both really good. They're both parts of what it is to be a human. Like part of what's so incredible about the human spirit is our commitment to like strive beyond. That's why we have technology. That's why you and I can talk across the world and have this live conversation. Because if not for that human spirit, none of this would get created. We would just be hunter gatherers and not bother ever going beyond that point. So they're both really beautiful. So now that I've laid these two opposing things out, we can come back to like someone showing up and being like, I really want to make more money. So they kind of want more success. They want more from the success arm. But the only way they can figure out how to do that is to like take from the other side of the equation, which is great. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to put in more hours at my work because then I'll get more success. But then I'm going to feel even less peaceful. And that sort of sucks. And so what they do is this kind of balancing of the scales to figure out like what's the best way, like how much am I willing to work? How hard am I willing to grind? How much am I willing to let go of peace? And that's the most amount of money I can make inside this paradigm. And when we're working with someone's being, we would say that's not a breakthrough. That's just like an adjustment of the scales. The breakthrough would be where they get to this awareness, that an awareness, and then they create their life this way, where they discover that actually the more spaciousness and the more peace and the more rest that I create in my life, the more money I can make and the greater the impact I can have and the greater the results I create in the world and the more meaning I get from my work. So instead of these being two things on either side of the scales where they're kind of pulling from one another, instead they're all collectively together, and they're growing and they become more powerful the more they lean into all of that. And so that's what we would call a shift in being. It's not just a shift in circumstances like making more money, it's a change in how I'm showing up in my life and what I do in my life.
I'm wondering now. I got caught up in the analogy that may or may not work. So
Uh-huh.
let's see. So what I see in the typical way people think about it, including myself, I guess, is it's like a gas pedal and a brake in the car,
Uh-huh.
right? But
Yeah.
it feels binary. It's like, okay, I need to accelerate, I need to grind,
Yeah.
and now it's too much. Now I burned out, so I need to kind of step on the brakes, and probably could go farther and burn less gas if I realize that I don't need to push on one of them all the time.
Yes. Yeah, I have a client who was like winding or in the process of like, well, actually I have a bunch of clients in this place, like winding down a business. And they're kind of like, I don't know what to do next. I don't want to start another business. And I'll ask why. Like, we'll explore. Why not? Not because they're supposed to create another business, but just what's behind that. And typically it's a fear. And the fear is, I'm afraid that if I start another business, I'm going to get frantic and harried and like super busy, like I did with my last business. I made a ton of money doing it, but I didn't like the way I was being in it. I didn't like how I was showing up in my life. I never had time for anything. The truth is, if they believed that it was possible for them to create a business that was super successful and create all these results, and that inside that business they felt relaxed and at peace, they would start that business in a second. But it's the belief that that's not possible, and because of that, they don't try to create that. And that's where we end up getting kind of stuck with a halfway life. We get half of what we want from life, not all of what we want.
Half-Life. Oh, that's a
Mm-hmm.
different thing, I guess.
Good
But
game. Mm-hmm.
with the so let's before we wind down, I wanna talk a little bit about the book you wrote recently. Like, I know
Mm-hmm.
you wrote a book before as well, but the last one is the one you're most proud of, right? And is that
Yes. Yeah. Last one's the
I
good one.
I can see that's the good one. Huh? So the by the way, I always like your beard, but I had another guest who had even better beard than you did. So you need to check my feet, and then see who was
Beard
there.
check. Uh-huh.
But I need to try to get this motion as well.
It's very pleasing to be able to stroke your beard as you think.
I just wanted to ask with the book that we mentioned. Actually, I'm gonna put the link on screen. Is it a good place to start looking into this for people who never been exposed to this work or just hear this distinction for the first time? Where should they start looking? Where should they start engaging with your content?
Uh-huh. So the book's that's the intention of the book. And so what we're talking about is ontological work, which is again like what does it mean to lead as a function of who I'm being rather than a function of where I am in a hierarchy or the things I'm doing. Now, of course, what I'm doing is a function of who I'm being, blah, 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 blah. But let's not worry about that for now. And so there's like some books about that, but most of them are very esoteric, or they don't really provide us much of a framework. They kind of just, it's like being dropped in a river and being taught to swim that way. Whereas I kind of want to know, like, how does swimming work? And what is it? Like, what's water? And is it different swimming in molasses versus water? And these are the questions I'd like to know alongside being dropped into the river and learning to swim. And so this book that you've put on the screen, the intention is to give people like basically a framework, like a scaffolding that they can start to understand, oh, no wonder, for example, this employee I have seems really flaky. And to start to understand that flakiness as something other than this person's just deficient as a human being. I need to hire people that aren't flaky. That's not going to be a very powerful way to develop leadership. And so this book helps people learn to see a lot more depth with the people they're working with and to develop that depth as a function of their leadership. So I think that this book is a great place to start. Um, yeah.
So I know you're engaged in this work for quite some time, right? What is it, like
Yeah.
12 years more?
almost 15 at this point.
15. Oh,
Yeah.
nice. Okay, so I would say, now you're there, like ACC, PCC, MCC, you kind of have it all. You have all the diplomas on that, and a bunch of clients. You wrote books about it. So, do you still? Still loaded question. I kind of know the answer because I'm listening to the podcast and stuff. But do you still distinguish things for yourself? And what
Mm.
would be some of the things that were in your blind spot recently, and maybe you distinguished them and allowed you to make tweaks in your life for the better?
Yeah, tons. There's like this work is like peeling an onion. There's just like always new layers, and it's onions all the way down. There's no onion singularity. So like, or maybe there is, I don't know. But
There's nothing left
I'm
once you're done.
yeah, there's always like a new layer because as a human, we're never going to be fully expressed. Our capacity for expression is infinite. Our ability to currently express ourselves is finite. And so always there's more for me to discover. So like recently, a lot of the work for me lately has been in the realm of like surrender, which is quite annoying to me because how I was raised and learned to be in my life was like willing to grind and willing to do the hard work and like show me the thing I have to do and I will do that thing, no ifs, ands, or buts. And so that was good. Like in the early days as a lawyer or as a coach, I was willing to like go out and do the work to get the clients and to like build a business. But now at this point in my life and this point in my development, that's not the thing to do anymore. And really what there is for me to do is to slow way down and to listen quietly to like, what am I feeling called to do? What is my intuition guiding me towards? And that is super hard. Like I've just come back from Bay. My wife and I work in Costa Rica. We, in addition to this work that we do ontologically as leaders, we also support people to do work with ayahuasca, which is another ontological modality, really. And and so that dovetails with my work. And coming home from that, I'm so present to the fact that like what there is for me to do right now is just sit in a lot of space. And it's interesting because I have clients completing. So like my practice has been full for about the last year. Now there's like 2 clients that have left. So I've got a little bit more space and it's really hard for me to sit in the space. I got up this morning and I'm like, okay, it's 9 o'clock. I've got 2 hours till I talk to Alesh. This would be a great time to sit in the space. What am I going to do? I'm going to go play video games for 2 hours. That's what I did. And I can feel there's like a part of me that's like, yeah, but I think the actual thing for you to do right now, Adam, is to just like chill, just not do anything, let yourself be in nothingness. But I'm very resistant to that. And so that's like the edge that I'm up against right now is like breathing, slowing down, sitting in spaciousness as long as I can. And then when I stop being willing to do that and I'm like, nope, I got to go do work. Nope, I got to go write a book. I got to make myself do this, have grace for myself and just let myself be in that process. So that's some of the stuff that's a challenge for me to take on right now in my life.
Nice. So, what are we gonna do after we're done with this live stream, huh?
I'm going to go play video games. No, I have a call right after this.
Nice. All right then. So for those of you who joined throughout, I think we can finish by just wrapping up, saying what are the places where you can connect with Adam's content. Where is the best place? I know that you have the website, you are on Facebook, pretty active still. You have the podcast. What is the best starting point except buying a book?
Yeah. Yeah. So my website's the best probably, which is just my name, adamquiney.com. Everything is posted there. Yeah, thanks for putting that on the screen. And then the 3 main, I think those are the 3 main social media platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. I'm all active on and like kind of post this kind of content. And then my podcast, which is the Transformational Leader, you can search for it, is probably one of the best places if you're an audio kind of person, because I take what we do on that podcast is 2 things. One is we take a leadership concept that is like obvious, like, oh, obviously the leader eats last. And then we break it apart so you can see how, oh, there's way more nuance here and it's a little bit more counterintuitive than that. And then the other thing we do is I usually have long form interviews on that show as well, or shows where I'm speaking at length about various topics. So those are probably the best places to hang out.
Cool. So this is a wrap. So this is where you can find Adam's content. If you like these videos, if you like these interviews, I do this so far every week. So there's a huge backlog in there. This was actually, Adam, this was episode number 22, I believe. And there's more to come. So look me up on LinkedIn, and if you like it, comment or share. If you don't like it, keep it yourself. So
Don't want
pretty
to hear
much it for now. No. I wanna sit in silence. I don't wanna hear, that I did it wrong. So thank you so much, Adam, for taking the time. And well, I guess I'll see you on my screen on a different call.
It's my pleasure.